The big mansion stood quietly at the end of the street, its tall gates always closed, and its windows shining in the sunlight like glass shields. Inside that mansion lived a man whose life was full of riches but empty of laughter. His name was Mr. Adrian, a well-known CEO who had worked day and night for years to build his business empire. People outside saw him as a symbol of success, but what they did not know was that inside his heart, Adrian carried a silence that wealth could not heal. He had all the things most people could only dream about. Expensive cars stood lined up in his garage, artworks hung on the wide white walls, and his safe held treasures worth millions. Yet, when he sat down for dinner, there was no family at the long dining table, only his own reflection in the silver spoons. The echo of his footsteps in the large hallways reminded him daily of what he missed the most: companionship. Adrian was in his mid-40s. His hair was beginning to turn gray at the edges, and his eyes, though sharp in business meetings, grew tired when he was alone at night. Many years ago, he had chosen his career over everything else, telling himself that once he was rich, happiness would follow. But time had shown him otherwise. He had friends in the business world, but none of them truly understood him. Most of the people around him respected his power and money, not his heart. That was the truth he could never escape. To keep his mansion running, Adrian hired a few staff members: a driver, a cook, and a maid. He changed maids often because none of them seemed right for the job. Some were careless, some were greedy, and some simply left because they could not keep up with his strict standards. He was not cruel, but he wanted everything done properly. The mansion was the only place he could control completely, and he wanted it perfect. One Monday morning, Adrian hired a new maid. She was a young woman named Clara, simple in appearance but polite in every word. She wore plain clothes, carried no jewelry, and spoke softly, with a kind of honesty that was rare. Clara came from a small town far away. Her family struggled to make ends meet, and she had taken the job not just for herself but also to support her younger brother's education. Adrian did not know all of her story yet, but he sensed something different about her. She did not seem to care about the mansion's glamour, she simply wanted to work and do it well. At first, Adrian observed her quietly. From his study, he could see the hallways and sometimes hear the sounds of her cleaning. She worked with care, never rushing, never breaking things. She greeted the other staff politely and never complained, even when the tasks were heavy. Once, he noticed her standing still in the living room, staring at a painting on the wall. It was a painting Adrian had bought years ago for millions, but she did not look at it with greed. She looked at it as if it told her a story, her eyes lost in thought, almost as if she was dreaming. That small detail caught Adrian's attention. Though he never showed it, Adrian had doubts in his mind. He had been betrayed before. People had taken advantage of him, lied to him, and stolen from him. Even some of his old staff had tried to trick him. So when he looked at Clara, he asked himself, is she truly honest? Or is she just pretending until she gets a chance? The thought stayed with him, and he found himself watching her more than he expected. Every time she passed by his office with a duster or carried laundry to the other side of the house, he noticed how she kept her head down, not peeking into places that were not hers. She never asked about his wealth, never mentioned money, and never tried to get close to him for favors. This behavior made him curious. One evening, Adrian sat in his study, staring at the tall safe in the corner of the room. The safe was his most guarded possession, holding cash, jewelry, and important documents. No one except him had ever opened it. An idea came to his mind, an unusual one, but it filled him with a strange excitement. What if, he thought, I leave the safe open just once and see what she does? It would be a test, a way to know whether Clara was different from the others or if she too would fall into the trap of temptation. The thought did not leave him that night. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this plan was fair. After all, Clara had done nothing wrong. But a voice inside him whispered, "You need to know. You cannot trust anyone blindly, not when you have this much to lose." The next morning, he watched Clara as she dusted the shelves and arranged the cushions. She worked with the same quiet dedication, her face calm and her movements neat. Adrian leaned back in his chair, conflicted between his growing respect for her and his deep fear of betrayal. The mansion felt even quieter that day. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder, and the sunlight streaming through the wide glass windows lit up every corner of the study. Adrian looked again at the safe. It stood there like a silent guardian of his fortune, its steel door hiding not just money but also secrets of his business life. Slowly, he stood up, walked to the safe, and turned the lock. With a click, the heavy door opened, revealing stacks of currency neatly tied together, shining jewelry boxes, and thick files. He left it slightly open, the valuables inside visible enough for anyone to notice. He stepped back, his heart beating faster than it should. He was not a man easily shaken, but this moment made him feel vulnerable. He arranged his plan carefully. Pretending he had to leave for a meeting, he walked out of the study. But he did not go far. Hidden cameras in the mansion were already installed for security, and he decided to rely on them to see what Clara would do. He went to a separate room and turned on the screen that connected to the cameras. His eyes stayed fixed, waiting for the moment Clara entered the study. As he sat there, he felt something strange, almost like guilt. Was it right to test someone this way? But another part of him whispered, better to know the truth now than regret it later. Minutes passed, and his heart raced. He had never cared so much about a test before, but this was different. Something inside him wanted Clara to pass. Something inside him wanted to believe there were still honest people left in the world. Clara finished folding the laundry in the guest room and carried the neat stack of towels to the storage cabinet. The morning sun shone through the wide glass windows, filling the mansion with soft golden light. She moved quietly, her footsteps light on the polished floor. She always tried to do her work properly, not only because she was paid for it, but because she believed in honesty and hard work. Every small task mattered to her, from dusting the smallest corner to arranging flowers in the vase. In another part of the mansion, Adrian sat in front of the screen that showed the security cameras. His heart was restless, beating faster than he expected. He had left the safe open on purpose. It was something he had never done before, not once in all his years of protecting his fortune. Even when close business partners visited, the safe was always locked. But today was different. Today, he wanted to know the truth about Clara. The idea had grown in his mind like a seed. It was not only about the money or the jewelry inside the safe. It was about trust. For years, Adrian had believed people were drawn to him only for his wealth. That belief had created a wall around him, making him distant and cautious. Now Clara's presence had slowly started to shake that wall. She had shown nothing but honesty in her work, and he needed to be sure. This test, as unfair as it felt, was his way of searching for peace of mind. The safe stood wide open in the study. Inside, bundles of cash were neatly stacked, their edges crisp and new. A small box with gold jewelry rested in the corner, and beside it were files containing confidential documents, details of Adrian's companies, investments, and future plans. For any ordinary person, the sight of that wealth would be overwhelming. Adrian knew it. He knew temptation could be strong, and that was exactly why this test mattered to him. Clara carried her cleaning supplies into the hallway and slowly made her way toward the study. She had never entered the study without reason. It was Adrian's private space, and she respected that. But part of her daily duty was to dust the shelves and clean the windows in that room. So, she turned the handle gently and stepped inside, holding her cleaning cloth and spray bottle. The first thing she noticed was the sunlight falling across the large desk, making the papers on top shine faintly. She walked in quietly, as she always did, her eyes moving across the familiar space. But then, her gaze stopped. The safe. Her breath caught for a moment. The heavy steel door, which was always closed, now stood slightly open. At first, she thought it might be a mistake, maybe the lock wasn't shut properly the night before. But as she moved closer, she could see the contents inside: money, jewelry, important-looking files. Clara froze. Her mind went blank for a few seconds. She had never seen so much cash in one place. The notes were stacked so neatly that they almost looked unreal, like something from a dream. The jewelry sparkled faintly in the dim light, catching her eyes. She took a deep breath and stepped back. In that moment, 1,000 thoughts rushed into her mind. This is none of my business, she told herself. But what if someone else finds it before the master notices, another thought argued. She stood there, her hands trembling slightly. She thought of her family, her younger brother studying back in her hometown. She thought of the struggles they faced every day. For a quick second, a dangerous thought crossed her mind: if she just took one small bundle of cash, nobody might notice. That money could pay for her brother's school, buy medicine for her mother, and bring food for her siblings. But Clara immediately shook her head. No. That was not who she was. Her father had always told her, "We may be poor, but we do not take what is not ours." Those words echoed in her heart. She could not betray her own values. She could not betray the trust of the man who had given her this job. Adrian, watching from the other room through the camera screen, leaned forward. His hands tightened on the armrest of his chair. He could see her face, the way she froze in front of the safe. He could almost feel the storm of thoughts inside her. This was the moment. Would she fail, like so many before her? Or would she rise above temptation? Clara stood silently for a few more seconds. Then, with steady hands, she reached forward. She did not touch the money. She did not touch the jewelry. Instead, she carefully closed the heavy safe door until it clicked shut. She stood there for another moment, looking at it with concern. Then she walked to the desk, picked up a piece of paper and a pen, and wrote a small note. Her handwriting was neat but simple: "Sir, I found your safe open while cleaning. I did not touch anything. Please be careful next time." She placed the note on top of the desk where Adrian could easily see it. Then she picked up her cleaning cloth again and began dusting the shelves as if nothing unusual had happened. Her face was calm now, her mind at peace with the choice she had made. On the other side of the cameras, Adrian's eyes filled with emotion. He had been prepared for disappointment. He had been ready to see greed win once again. But instead, what he saw left him speechless. Clara's honesty was not an act. It was real. She had faced temptation directly and chosen integrity. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he had almost forgotten: relief. Relief that there were still people in the world who valued honesty over riches. His heart softened in that moment. He knew he had tested her unfairly, yet her actions proved she was different. Meanwhile, Clara continued cleaning the study as if the safe had never been open. When she left the room, she carried her supplies with quiet dignity, never knowing that her every move had been watched. Adrian stayed in the other room for a while, lost in thought. His test had been risky, but it had shown him the truth. And that truth touched his heart in a way he had not expected. Clara was not just another maid. She was someone rare, someone who carried values stronger than greed. As he switched off the camera screen, he whispered to himself, maybe I am not as alone as I thought. But deep inside, he also knew this was only the beginning. He would have to decide what to do next, whether to keep the secret to himself or reveal to Clara that he had been watching all along. The day passed slowly inside the mansion, but Clara felt something heavy in her heart after what had happened in the study. She did not tell anyone about the open safe, not even the cook or the driver. She believed it was not her story to share. Instead, she focused on her work as she always did. She polished the silver cutlery, arranged flowers in the hallway, and swept the marble floors. But her mind kept returning to that safe, and to the note she had left on Mr. Adrian's desk. She wondered how he would react when he saw it. Would he think she was being nosy? Would he be angry that she had even noticed it? Clara didn't know. All she knew was that she had done the right thing. She had chosen honesty over temptation, and in her heart, she felt peace. Still, a small fear lingered, the fear that her employer might not understand her intentions. Meanwhile, Adrian returned to his study later that afternoon. He walked inside slowly, his eyes landing immediately on the safe. It was closed, just as he had seen on the camera. His gaze then moved to the desk, and there it was, the note. The piece of paper looked simple, but the words written on it carried a weight that struck his heart. "Sir, I found your safe open while cleaning. I did not touch anything. Please be careful next time." Adrian picked up the note, reading it again and again. Each word felt like proof of something he had long stopped believing in. He sat down in his chair, holding the paper gently as though it was more valuable than the jewelry inside the safe. For a man who had spent most of his life surrounded by people chasing money, this little act of honesty felt like a rare treasure. That evening, while dinner was being prepared, Adrian walked down the hallways of his mansion, lost in thought. He saw Clara working near the dining room, wiping the chairs with care. She looked up for a moment, gave a polite nod, and then went back to her task without saying anything more. Adrian watched her silently, wondering how one person could show such dignity in such a simple act. For the first time in years, he wanted to speak, not as a CEO, not as a master of the house, but as a human being who was touched by kindness. Yet he kept quiet, deciding to wait for the right moment. The next few days continued normally, but inside Adrian, something had changed. He found himself paying attention to Clara more often. He noticed how she never rushed through her work, how she treated every item in the mansion with respect, even the smallest things like a broken vase she carefully glued back together instead of throwing away. She spoke politely to the cook and driver, never raising her voice. And most of all, she never once asked about his wealth or personal life, something others had always been curious about. But Clara was not free from worry. She often thought about her family back home. Her younger brother, Daniel, was talented in his studies but needed money for school fees. Clara had promised herself that she would work hard until she could send enough for him. Sometimes, when she stood by the large windows of the mansion, watching the city lights at night, she thought of her small home in the countryside, where her mother cooked simple meals and her father worked long hours in the fields. Those memories gave her strength to continue her work with honesty, no matter how hard it became. One afternoon, Adrian invited a few business partners to his mansion for a meeting. Clara quietly served them tea and snacks, moving around a large table with her tray. She kept her eyes down, not wanting to intrude. But as she placed the cups, she heard the men discussing large numbers, millions in investments, deals that could change the future of entire companies. For a moment, she felt the difference between their world and hers. They spoke of money as if it were a simple thing, while for her, even a few $100s could mean survival for her family. Adrian noticed her silent movements and the way she quietly left after serving. He admired that she never lingered, never tried to listen more than necessary. It reminded him of the safe test once again. He knew she could have taken a bundle of money that day and disappeared, but she hadn't. That thought gave him a deep respect for her. Later that evening, Adrian sat in his study with the safe locked once more. He remembered the moment he had watched her hesitate, then choose honesty. That image replayed in his mind like a film. he realized that her honesty had done something no amount of wealth could do. It had given him hope. Hope that not all people were greedy, and that trust was still possible. Clara, on the other hand, tried to keep her heart simple. She did not know she had passed a secret test. To her, it had only been a moment where she needed to decide between right and wrong. And she had chosen right, because that was what she had been taught since childhood. But little did she know, her decision had touched the heart of the very man who employed her. One night, as she finished cleaning the dining room, she found Adrian sitting alone at the table, staring at the candle light. For a moment, she hesitated, then softly asked, "Would you like me to bring you anything, sir?" Adrian looked up, surprised. It was rare for her to speak unless spoken to. He shook his head gently. "No, thank you." There was silence for a few seconds before he added, almost as if speaking to himself, "Clara, do you believe honesty still matters in this world?" Clara was taken aback. She held the cloth in her hands tightly and thought carefully before answering. "Yes, sir. It always matters. Maybe not everyone chooses it, but it always matters. Without it, nothing feels right." Adrian's lips curved into a small, rare smile. He nodded, his eyes reflecting the weight of her words. That night, when Clara returned to her small staff quarters, she lay awake thinking about his question. She did not know why he had asked her that, but she hoped her answer had been enough. For Adrian, however, it was more than enough. Her answer confirmed what he had already seen with his own eyes. Her honesty was not a mask, it was a part of her soul. And that realization made his lonely mansion feel a little less empty. Still, Adrian knew there was more to this story. He had not yet revealed to her that he had been watching. He had not told her about the test. A part of him felt guilty, but another part of him wondered if there was a way to repay her honesty with kindness. He decided he would wait a little longer, observe her more, and then choose the right time to reveal the truth. For Clara, life continued as usual, but something was quietly building in the air, a bond between two people from completely different worlds. One was a millionaire CEO, carrying loneliness in his heart. The other was a humble maid, carrying honesty as her only wealth. Neither of them knew how much their lives were about to change because of one open safe and one honest choice. The following days in the mansion felt different for Adrian. Something inside him had changed after Clara closed the safe and left that small note on his desk. The paper was still tucked away in his drawer, and every night, before he left the study, he opened it and read it again. It was just one sentence, but to him, it was worth more than any business contract he had ever signed. He had always believed that trust was a fragile thing, almost impossible to find in his world of power and money. People often pretended to be loyal while waiting for the right moment to take advantage. But Clara's choice had shaken that belief. He now felt something new: respect, and a quiet admiration for this young woman who worked so humbly under his roof. Adrian began to notice small details about Clara that he had never paid attention to before. He saw how she woke up earlier than the others, starting her day with quiet dedication. He noticed how she treated the cook and the driver kindly, never speaking down to them even though she too worked hard and had every reason to be tired. When she walked through the mansion, she moved with calmness, as if her presence itself brought order to the vast, lonely house. One evening, after finishing his work, Adrian decided to sit in the garden. The mansion's garden was wide, with neatly trimmed hedges, roses blooming in rows, and a fountain in the center. He rarely came there because he was always busy with meetings and phone calls. But that evening, he wanted peace. To his surprise, he saw Clara in the garden too. She was watering the plants, her simple dress brushing against the grass as she moved from one flower bed to another. She did not notice him at first. She hummed softly to herself, a tune so gentle that it seemed to blend with the whisper of the evening breeze. For a man like Adrian, who lived surrounded by noise of business and wealth, This small moment of simplicity touched him deeply. When she finally saw him, she quickly lowered her head. "Good evening, sir," she said softly, almost shyly. Adrian gave a small nod. "Good evening, Clara. You like gardening?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, sir. At home, we had a small piece of land. My mother loved flowers. I I guess I do too." Adrian's eyes softened. For the first time, he wanted to ask more, to know more about her life beyond the walls of his mansion. "Tell me about your home," he said. Clara looked surprised. The master of the house had never asked her about her personal life before. She shifted uncomfortably, not sure if he was serious. But when she saw his calm expression, she spoke in a low, thoughtful voice. "It is not much, sir. Just a small house in the countryside. My parents still live there. My father works in the fields, and my mother takes care of the house. I have a younger brother, Daniel. He studies hard because he wants to become something better, maybe a doctor one day. But school fees are difficult. That is why I work here. To help them." Adrian listened silently, every word sinking into his heart. He could see the honesty in her eyes, the quiet pride she carried for her family, and the sacrifices she made for them. "You work very hard," Adrian said finally. "Most people in your place might not care so much." Clara smiled faintly, though her eyes looked a little tired. "I only do what I can, sir. Life does not give us everything we want, but we can still choose how we live." Those words stayed with Adrian long after she left the garden that evening. They echoed in his mind during meetings, during his meals, even as he sat alone at night. Life does not give us everything we want, but we can still choose how we live. He realized that she was right. He had all the wealth he could ever dream of, yet he felt lonely because of the choices he had made. Clara, with so little, carried herself with dignity and peace. The bond between them grew silently after that day. Adrian did not speak much, but he began to greet her more warmly. When she served his meals, he sometimes asked simple questions like, "How was your day?" or "Are you getting enough rest?" Clara always answered politely, never speaking too much, but she noticed the change in his tone. It was softer now, less distant. At the same time, Adrian began to feel guilt about the test he had put her through. The memory of the open safe weighed heavily on his conscience. He had doubted her, even though she had shown no reason to be doubted. Yet, her actions had restored his faith in honesty. He wanted to tell her the truth, to confess what he had done, but each time he tried, the words would not come. He feared she might feel betrayed by the way he had tested her. One night, as rain tapped against the windows, Adrian sat in his study, staring at the safe once more. He thought about the years he had spent protecting it, guarding its contents as though they were the most important things in the world. But now, he realized that the safe was only metal and money. What mattered more was the person who had chosen not to touch it. The loneliness that had once felt like a permanent shadow over his life began to lift, little by little. He found himself waiting for those small moments when Clara's presence filled the mansion with quiet strength. Even when she was simply walking through the hallways with a basket of laundry, he felt a comfort he had not known in years. The cook noticed the change in Adrian too. One morning, she whispered to Clara in the kitchen, "The master seems lighter these days. Not as serious as before. I think you bring good luck here." Clara blushed at the remark and shook her head. "I don't think so. I only do my work." But deep down, she too sensed something different. She could not explain it, but there was a new kindness in Adrian's eyes whenever he spoke to her. As days turned into weeks, Adrian knew he could no longer keep the truth hidden. He owed it to Clara. He wanted her to know how much her honesty had changed him, how much her simple act had meant. He wanted to reward her, not out of pity, but out of respect. And so, he began to plan. He thought about her family, her brother's education, the sacrifices she had spoken about in the garden. He realized he had the power to change her life for the better, just as she had unknowingly changed his. But before he could act, he knew he had to face the hardest part, telling her the truth about the test. It was a confession that weighed heavily on his heart, but it was also the only way to show her that he valued her honesty above everything else. That night, as he looked out of his window at the city lights glowing in the distance, Adrian whispered to himself, "Tomorrow. Tomorrow I will tell her everything." The next morning, the mansion was calm, filled with the quiet hum of daily chores. The cook prepared breakfast in the kitchen, the driver polished the car outside, and Clara dusted the furniture in the living room. To her, it was just another day, but for Adrian, it was a day that carried great weight. He had spent the whole night thinking about what he would say to her, rehearsing the words in his mind. When Clara passed by his study with her cleaning supplies, Adrian called her name gently. "Clara, could you come inside for a moment?" She paused, surprised. Usually, he did not call her unless it was about work. She stepped into the study, her eyes respectful but curious. "Yes, sir." Adrian gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit down." Clara hesitated, unsure if she should. She had never been asked to sit in his study before. But when she saw his calm expression, she obeyed and sat quietly, folding her hands in her lap. For a few seconds, Adrian simply looked at her, wondering where to begin. Then, he took a deep breath. "Clara, there is something important I must tell you. Something I should have said earlier." Her eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, waiting. "You remember the day you found the safe open in this room?" Adrian asked slowly. Clara nodded. "Yes, sir. I left you a note about it." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his voice heavy with honesty. "That safe was not left open by mistake. I left it open on purpose." Clara blinked in confusion. "On purpose?" "Yes," Adrian continued, his tone serious but gentle. "I wanted to test you. To see if you were honest. To see if you would take anything. I was watching from another room, through the cameras. I saw everything, how you hesitated, how you closed the safe, and how you left me that note. I saw your honesty when you could have chosen otherwise." Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She felt her cheeks grow warm with surprise. For a moment, she did not know what to say. You were watching me," she finally asked softly. Adrian nodded, guilt in his eyes. "Yes. And I know it was unfair. You had done nothing to deserve my suspicion. But I have been betrayed before, Clara. Too many times. I did not trust easily. Yet what you did that day proved to me that there are still people in this world who value honesty. You showed me something I thought no longer existed." Clara lowered her eyes, her hands gripping tightly together. She did not feel anger, but she felt a strange mix of emotions: surprise, confusion, and a quiet sense of dignity. She had only done what she believed was right, nothing more. "I am sorry," Adrian said softly. "Sorry for doubting you. But at the same time, I am grateful. Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten, that trust is still possible." Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Clara lifted her head, her voice calm but steady. "Sir, I did not do anything special. I only did what I thought was right. My father always taught me that honesty is the only wealth poor people can keep. If I had taken even one coin, I would have lost that wealth forever." Adrian's eyes softened, and for the first time in many years, he felt his heart touched deeply by another person's words. "Clara," he said, "what you see as ordinary, I see as extraordinary. And I will never forget it." He stood up, walked to the safe, and opened it once more. The stacks of cash and the jewelry inside glittered under the light. Clara looked at it but kept her eyes respectful, just as she had before. Adrian turned toward her, holding a small bundle of papers. "These are documents," he explained. "I have arranged for your younger brother's education to be fully paid, all the way until university. He will never have to worry about fees again. And I will also provide support for your family, so your parents can live more comfortably." Clara gasped, her eyes widening. "Sir, no. I cannot accept this. It is too much." Adrian smiled gently, shaking his head. "You have already given me something greater than money, peace of mind. Do not see this as charity, Clara. See it as a reward for the honesty you showed when no one was watching." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, and she quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. You've changed my family's life." Adrian walked closer and placed the documents in her hands. "You do not need to thank me. Just promise me one thing, that you will never lose the honesty that makes you who you are. That is your true treasure." Clara nodded firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I promise." The atmosphere in the study grew warm, filled with something that had been missing from Adrian's life for years: genuine human connection. For so long, his wealth had built walls around him, but Clara's simple act of honesty had broken through them. From that day onward, the mansion no longer felt like a lonely palace. Adrian began to speak more openly, sometimes even sharing meals with his staff, something he had never done before. The cook laughed more, the driver smiled more, and Clara worked with a new lightness in her heart. One evening, Adrian found himself walking through the garden again. Clara was there, tending to the roses. He stopped beside her and said quietly, "Clara, you may think you are just a maid, but you have given me more than anyone else ever has. You gave me trust. And trust is something money can never buy." Clara looked at him, her eyes shining in the soft glow of the sunset. She did not speak, but she smiled a smile full of gratitude, honesty, and quiet strength. In that moment, Adrian realized he was no longer the lonely CEO who lived only for business. He was a man who had been reminded of life's true wealth: integrity, kindness, and human connection. The story of the open safe became a turning point in his life. It taught him that even in a world filled with greed, honesty still lived in the hearts of those who valued it. And for Clara, it was proof that doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, could open doors she never dreamed of. As the days turned into months, Clara's brother thrived in his studies, her parents lived in comfort, and Adrian found himself surrounded not just by wealth, but by respect and loyalty. And whenever he looked at Clara working quietly in the mansion, he was reminded of that single note she had left on his desk, a note that had changed both their lives forever. And so, the lonely CEO and the humble maid, two people from different worlds, were bound together by one simple truth: honesty is the most valuable treasure of all.